IVM.
This is Storytellers and Storysellers live on tape. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar on the IVM Podcast Network. We are back on part 2 of our chat with Priyanka Khimani, who is so much more than an entertainment lawyer, as we established in our previous episode. If you haven't heard that part yet, please press the back button, go to the previous episode, and start there. Priyanka, before we went into our first episode break, we were talking about how you would advise a young artist from a legal perspective, right? And I was drawing on my own experience as a young guy with a band to try and relate it. Related to that, let me ask you this, right? To get this episode started, the music industry is one that gets disrupted so often, right? I think the only industry that gets disrupted more from a technology perspective, I think, is porn. But apart from that, from a distribution, technology, legal, all other sorts of perspectives, music is like on the leading edge of entertainment, right? You had like from the 60s and 70s where there was the payola crisis where people were paying DJs to play their songs. Then the loudness was... This is like every corner of technology can be exploited for legal benefit in music, right? And we've seen it happen with Napster and Metallica. Napster died in 99 and Metallica also kind of died around that time only. They've not made a good album since. But today we find ourselves in a world where there are streaming apps, there's still piracy that is still a problem, although it's gone down in the past few years, still a problem. There's streaming apps, there's vinyl, obviously that's another resurgence happening. So there's also TikTok, there's also social, there's also music getting embedded everywhere, right? When you really think about it, music is the most consumed per capita sort of piece of content, right? You listen to the same song most often, different forms. So my long-winded setup to this question, the question that I wanted to bring to you is, what happens to this industry going from a legal perspective, right? And this is the setup. In 2020, musicians are not making any more money from publishing because Spotify or streaming services don't pay any money. There is little money coming from iTunes or wherever else. Live shows are now gone out the window. Your songs are getting used on TikTok. Nobody knows how many billions of views they're garnering. It's great marketing, but it doesn't make you any money. Where does this leave a musician and the music business from a legal perspective? What are your thoughts? Short question, right?
Yes, extremely. So focused. Well, I think, gosh, I don't even know where to begin because there is so much to be said about the music industry and how it overlaps with legal. But you're absolutely right. I think it's one of the places that has seen maximum amount of disruption in the last few years, at least in the decade, almost now a decade of me practicing in this particular industry. I've seen so many ups and downs and so many changes. But having said that, specifically with India, I think it is also one of the places where you have the maximum amount of misconceptions. So much so that I actually had to I started like a true or false series that I do on social media where I just to sort of bust all of these common misnomers that people have. So like you said, right, I don't get, mujhe royalty nahi milti hai, or, oh, this person owns all of my copyright, or, oh, there's no publishing income in India, and all of that, right? You've been hearing this for many years, and going with how the sentiment is, perhaps we may continue hearing it for a while. But the reality is that a lot of it has changed, is changing, and is changing rapidly, right? First and foremost is, yes, you may have a certain revenue source that is not fetching as much revenue as you would have hoped, but at the same time, it is balanced with your record deals that you get signed, right? Today, when you are getting signed to a record label, there are significant advances that are being paid to you to sign to that particular record. Right. So then it is only fair and balanced that the other person is going to want to recover that investment. Similarly, when you're living in a day and age like we discussed in our last episode, where you, thanks to technology, have the ability to no longer necessarily be dependent entirely on a record label, where you can put your music out there, you can own your music, you can distribute it, in a manner that you have control over it. So I think with all of these tools, what is starting to happen is you're seeing a lot of artists not just being authors, but now also being owners of their own works. And that's a big change. And music, I think the beauty of copyrighted music is how many, many, many derivatives come out of it, right? You take a piece of music, like you said, it's probably the most, one of the most consumed commodities per capita. Like you see it everywhere. So
Right.
you have a simple piece of music, I can translate it, I can adapt it. There are remixes, recreations, like it's getting placed as a jingle in an ad film. It is getting picked up by a platform to be, used in the background scene, the background score of a scene. And,
It's playing in a restaurant.
it's
It's music in a
ringtones,
restaurant
it's
somewhere. Yeah.
exactly, it's endless. And every single usage is, to the extent possible, authorized, which means that it is getting monetized. And there is an ecosystem for that money to be distributed
Right.
among stakeholders, where
Right.
the artist also is one of the stakeholders. Again, I can't speak for what happens in other parts of the world, but in India, at least from experience, I have noticed that very often artists will say that, oh, I'm not getting a single rupee in royalties. And my question is, have you registered yourself with any society, with any PRO? The answer 9 out of 10 times is no. In the limited instances where the answer is yes, my next question is, okay, great that you're a member. Have you told them what are the works that you've composed in your career? The answer is no. So now if you're not a member, or if you are a member and not even registered your works, how do you expect to get paid, right? I think music is one of those areas where people completely lack education. And now I don't expect an artist to be educated about this, because just like we spoke in the previous episode, is that, it's a specialist job, right? Just like I can't write music, I don't expect the artist to know the legalese behind the music. But
Right.
that's why you have people around you. So you have managers, agents, you have your record label, your publishers, you have like a whole bunch of other people who are there, right? Who need to be equipped to understand and educate you that what is it that you need to do so that you're not leaving money on the table.
Right.
More often than not, it's all there, but it's just not being collected. And I think for me, that is one of the most heartbreaking things to realize. Or I'll give you another example, right? You've signed this big record deal where you only focused on what is the paycheck that I'm taking home on signing, right? Or how much is this label willing to pay for me today?
Right.
And in that process, at that moment, you're very happy with the number that you're getting, right? But you've not bothered negotiating on anything else. You'd be surprised. Sometimes we've looked at some of the biggest names in the business from time to time, and it surprises me that there was not one single legal person that was engaged to look over that document. And what artists don't realize, and I hope that while somebody is listening to this, I can communicate a point across, is that if you're, at some stage or another, you're going to end up spending on legal expenses.
Right.
You may as well do it right in the beginning, because if I'm not seeing a document at the beginning, I guarantee you I'm seeing it at the end of it, right? So I think that's what the focus is so different, right? We're focused on the paycheck. Your agent or manager is focused on, how much is my live show going to sell at? How much am I going to charge for this endorsement? But why is the conversation not about, okay, what is the revenue share going to be? Not just that, how often am I going to get this? Is it coming to me every quarter? Is it coming to me twice a year? Are you going to help me administer things on the publishing side? What else do I need to do to protect how much are you going to recoup? At what stage do I start seeing the overflow? And if you listen to all of these terms, none of this is legal. I've still not even gotten to ownership of copyright or what are the rights that are being assigned or licensed. I'm still talking pure commercial business terms. But fact of the matter is that we think very little about it, because I think the priority is very different.
Right.
I'm pleasantly happy that it's changing with this new wave of non-film music again making a comeback in India. So I know that there is a long way to go, but I feel that there is a lot to be done as far as educating the artists and the people or the crew around the artist is concerned for things to truly change and be effective for them.
Let me ask you a couple of follow-ups there. First of, is it hard to get that registration done?
Not at all. It's
Right?
all there. It's a website. They have information. I mean, you think that you're not happy with the setup in India, you're free to go pick up a society in another part of the world. You've got PROs in America, in Europe, in UK, in Canada, and, become a member. And these are all, it's as seamless as, you go online on Amazon and want to buy things. It's all there. Log on to their website. They'll guide you. There is a process. It's step by step by step. It's just that someone has to do that work.
Right. My sort of second follow-up there is that while all that you talked about from a commercial perspective makes a whole lot of sense, right? How do you address this education gap that exists, right? And I'll give you one example that popped into my head. One of my favorite things about one of my favorite companies in the entertainment world ever is this very well-known artist management company called CAA, right? Creative Artists. The reason why I love CAA is because they created those licensing revenue streams for years, right? Packaging and licensing are the two things that CAA gave the entertainment law. And again, an agency based on lawyers with lawyers coming together and all that, right? What will it take for that education gap to get addressed in India? I know that I draw the CAA example because a lot of it was lawyers from Harvard or lawyers from Stanford. There's this guy called Sandy Klein who used to be called the briefcase, who brought data into how commercial was planned and stuff like that. How do you see that getting changed in India? What is that getting addressed, that education gap?
To a great extent, yes. I mean, there are people like me, for example, that try to do a lot. We curate another music conference. I travel to various cities, platforms, try and put out as much information as I can online on my social media pages, and just constantly try and engage in a conversation with artists irrespective of what their stature is. But equally, I think the new generation of managers and agents that I see, they're all really well equipped. They're all people who are knowledgeable, or even if they don't themselves know it, at least they will ensure that their talent is getting access to good, sound legal advice from someone who knows what they're doing. And, when it comes to music, right? Yes, broadly, a lot of it falls under intellectual property, but even amongst intellectual property practitioners or copyright experts, music is a separate world in itself, right? So it's not just good enough that you go to a lawyer. It is, in fact, it is more important that you go to someone who is an absolute specialist when it comes to that. I think it is changing. I increasingly see artists come to me, even when they're young bands, where they've just published just put out a few songs, but not shying away from saying that, listen, we want to make sure that we can work together with each other for the next few years in a way that, we're not feeling that the other person got shortchanged. So and equally, you see some of the bigger guys who've been around for years and years and who've still had that diary manager or secretary, who now reach out and say, no, I still want to correct a pattern that has, been not ideal for so many years. And I think it's fantastic that you see that happening. It's happening. It's slowly but steadily happening.
It's absolutely lovely to hear that, and I think big shout out to the next generation of talent managers. I think
100%.
A lot rests on the couple of generations that we have here, right? Like entire industry in flux, things changing all the time. These are a lot.
I must say, even with the talent-led record labels that are being set up, almost every single one of them will call and tell me that, Priyanka, but we want to set up something that is going to be fair. Right? Tell me, what do I do? Do I need to, co-own copyright? Do I need to arrive at some better sort of revenue share numbers, etc.? And just the fact that thought is being put into it is extremely encouraging for me.
That's fantastic to hear. I think it's one of the more important tenets of a scene to really take off for people to start appreciating the legal nuances that go into planning long term value. Right. I think long term value
Yes.
being the operative word there. Let me ask you this last bit about music. Right. One of my favorite artists has complained about this for years. Is how little money comes back to artists from streaming services. Now with music-based social short video platforms like a TikTok or a Triller or whoever else, even less of that. I mean, I could take a Radiohead song and make a video meme out of it and give no credit back to Radiohead. First of all, eventually somebody is using that for commercial benefit, right? It's benefiting somebody. It may not be benefiting the creator right now. Eventually it might be end up benefiting somebody, but it's definitely benefiting the platform itself, right?
Correct.
There's a case to be made that customer lifetime value is a proxy for commercial
Right.
anyway, right? Whatever said and done. How do you tackle this as from an industry? I'm asking you this as a thought leader. How do you tackle this? How is first of all, is it tackleable, or are we past the point of simplifying the strands? And if you do, how do you approach tackling something like as important as music rights, yet something that is as far flung as music distribution?
Vineet, I think it is actually one of the areas of intellectual property law where you see the maximum amount of enforcement of rights. Every single day, licenses are being negotiated. They are being negotiated and entered into territory by territory, record label by record label, publisher by publisher, PRO by PRO, right? You have as various services, and I think next time that you talk to any one of the DSPs or any of the internet streaming services that you have, they will tell you that as painful as it is, licenses are being sought, right?
Right, right.
And there are a bunch of arguments that you'll hear when it comes to use of music, especially I think in the digital ecosystem, right? One is, yes, where artists feel that, I'm not seeing revenue from this. That's an easy one to address. It is not entirely true that you're not seeing revenue, right? The revenue doesn't have to come to you directly from the platform. There is a chain that is set up, right? So the platform is taking a license. It is taking it. There are a combination of licenses. So I will take a license from the owner of the copyright, but equally I'm also taking a license from a PRO, which are copyright societies, right? And I'm doing this worldwide for various jurisdictions, and your share is going to flow through that, right? At least in certain instances. So you are getting, there is income that is being allocated to you. It's a question of how are you going about collecting that income? So that's number one. Number two, in that same space, when it comes to artists themselves doing things on social media that requires the use of music, they don't believe in licensing,
Of
right?
course.
More, especially now when you're seeing this whole situation with the pandemic where everyone is taken to live streaming and
Right, right.
Insta lives and Facebook lives, and then getting upset that, oh, why the hell was it discontinued midway, or why am I being told that I need a license for this, right? Well, just as much as you feel sorry when you don't get paid for your own works, is it then not fair that there is a license sought if you're going to be playing works, right? And there's a
Absolutely.
lot that one needs to understand around this. Very often I'll see artists get totally offended when when, especially when it is a song that they have originally performed or written, saying that why the hell do I need it for my own song, right? Well, look at it this way. And I equate it to real estate because that's the simplest way to explain it to somebody. I am a developer who owns this piece of land and I constructed this beautiful building with 40 units, right?
Right.
You came, paid me the price that I asked for this unit, right? I gave up the keys to you. I've transferred ownership to you. You own it. Is it fair, Vineet, for me to then come and tell you that, Vineet, just because I constructed this flat originally, at least twice a year you have to come and let me live in this house free of cost?
That's a great way of putting it. Absolutely.
It's pretty much the same logic when it comes to dealing with intellectual property. If you wanted to reserve certain kinds of uses for yourself, it is something that you need to negotiate at the time of you making that transfer.
Right.
But once I have transferred that ownership to somebody else, to then feel bad or offended or outraged that how the hell am I not being allowed to use something that I created in the first place, is just something that needs you to have careful commercial consideration. So that's the other part of it.
That's like, I mean, there is no way that a layperson can figure it out. So to bring back something that Priyanka said previously, get sound advice as musicians, right? So there's no way you're going to figure that out for yourself. But sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, and then I think coming back to the digital and the internet world, I think there's a lot that is being done. In fact, it is far more sophisticated than the other types of uses that you see, where it's licenses are being enforced, or it's easy because it's also easy to detect infringement, right? I mean, it's probably incorrect for me to say it's easy. It's still not easy. There's a lot of investment of time and effort and resources, but it's
technology
trackable.
Is there. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. There's technology that's supporting you. So because I have that, I can equally use that information and go to a platform and say that, hey, listen, a license needs to be sought. And of course, there's that whole eternal argument about, oh, but I'm just a platform. I'm an intermediary. I'm only facilitating users to generate and share content, etc. But between that chain of, someone using the platform, creating content, and you exhibiting it, one of you has got to be responsible for taking a license, right? I mean, right. A layperson clearly can't be
held responsible,
because they have very little understanding this whole attitude that, oh, but I'm just, walking my dog and there's a funny song playing in the background, so it makes for a fun video. Why the hell does that need a license? Now, imagine having millions of those videos and millions of those users wanting to go seek licenses. So the easier way to do it is that the platform seeks a license. So I think, to cut a long story short, licenses are being sought. It is not all unauthorized use. Where it is unauthorized, rights holders are spending enough money and time and effort to make sure that licenses are being sought and it is not going not being compensated for. And as far as talent is concerned, yes, that income, a part of that income does accumulate to you. It's a matter of how you're collecting it.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up on this one. So with so many platforms, right now it's very heartening to know that it's getting sorted out better and there are recourses for the artist as well. But let me ask you this, right? With so many platforms, so many forms of media, etc., is there like a thumb rule for when the industry starts recognizing that a platform is big enough for it to need some kind of technology or regulation, or it's just like
any use is use, right? Just like any infringement is infringement.
Right.
It's like asking that, is there a certain threshold for who gets, what car am I driving for me to get caught breaking a signal?
Right.
Ultimately, the offense is the same for everyone. आपने signal तोड़ा. अब आपने कौन सी गाड़ी में तोड़ा is immaterial.
Got it.
Should be, at least.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
But I'll give you another interesting thing that happens, right? Even when, and again, it just gives you perspective. So on the one hand, we're feeling bad about, our platform seeking a license, and are we doing enough to seek a license, and am I getting compensated? But equally on the other hand, I'll say, for example, when you have a lot of these, web series or films that are being shown online today, right? There is music that is used or somewhere seeps into the background. And
a great
instinct is to say, अरे यार पर ये तो सिर्फ 2 सेकंड है 10 सेकंड है under 30, it's just
I know from experience it is insane, right? So
and I get calls to say no but how you talk to them and tell them अच्छा हम ये निकाल देंगे, I'll edit it out, or अब तो नहीं हो सकता है, but सिर्फ 15 सेकंड तो यूज किया, but वो 15 सेकंड is there at some 6 different times in the damn episode, so I'm saying just as much as there is one side where we're feeling bad that we're not getting paid, there is a whole other side who doesn't want to pay either.
No, absolutely. I remember, with early TVF shows, right? There was music used from anywhere. Because this is the old Wild West. 2014 में web series बनाया, तब कोई voice ID is also not active. YouTube doesn't know anything yet. There is like Permanent Roommate season 1. There are songs from like a French band called Noir Desire and all that. Like कुछ भी गाना चल रहा है, ठीक है? Like, and when we started licensing out, like when we started licensing as a business unit, right? We were like, oh, yeah, this is our library here, 500 hours of this and it. And then one of the guys who just joined us, who looked at it critically, right? Like, one second, objectively looking at this, where did you get this music from? And then there was an 8-month process, 8 months to replace every single instance of usage. I'm not joking.
Acha. To replace it, not to pay for it.
No, to replace. How will you pay for it? It would have been like crores and crores of rupees.
It would have cost you a lot
It's
of
just
money.
cheaper to replace it, right? So we spent 8 months, every single instance, and there was an Excel sheet that some of us had who were working on this, where every single instance of music that was unlicensed, that was used,
was being weeded out carefully or being replaced.
Right?
Yeah.
And then there was this entire period of instilling a process where, okay, going forward, these are the only music banks we can use. Going forward, Saregama.
So happy that there was a process to use authorized music.
It took a while. It took a while to implement it. And there was always a fight because some editor somewhere or some director must have been like, "Arey, chhodna, ye wala utha ke le, let's take this." And then it would release. And the moment it would release, somebody from legal or someone from product, because we trained our product team to spot these, right? They would turn around and there would be a massive row. How did this happen? Why did this happen? But anyway, there's all teething problems, but I think a good problem. Moving in the right direction.
I mean, literally before starting this conversation with you, I've been resolving a situation where, again, the producer is like, "Arey, but it's just 10 seconds, yeah. What do I do? But it's on air, it's live." But I think the balancing act there is perhaps for the owners to all rights holders to think of a slightly more balanced sync licensing fee so that it makes it more palatable.
Right.
I think one of the biggest deterrents is that it depends on usage and there's no sort of rate card,
right, so
to say. So I think maybe that might encourage people to seek a license more actively.
We had like some kind of an arrangement where unique users and number of instances were both sort of a prepaid arrangement sort of a thing.
Correct.
Right? Where you're like, okay, I'm going to use it, these many unique ones, and these many times I'll use it. So again, it's also, I mean, it's ridiculous how we don't consider it, but this is how legal impacts your creative strategy also, right? When you really think about it. If you're running a creative business, because then you have to invest in the right kind of music banks, you have to invest in the right kind of talent, etc. So on.
Not just that, I think it starts much, much sooner than any of this. I mean, you'd be surprised, Vineet, but literally there is a dedicated team within my practice whose job is to only read scripts.
Right.
Right.
Wow.
So even before sometimes it's a script or as early as looking at it at a Bible stage or a concept stage, just to tell you what are the possible red flags. And those red flags are not necessarily IP related red flags, right? But they could be defamation. It could be something that is opposed to public policy. It could be, of course, infringement. It could be something that violates somebody's privacy, or a variety of issues. So I think that just makes you realize that how much the role has evolved. And you're right with how closely linked is legal and creative. And again, the approach is to not curb creative, but to sort of find, to sense a problem much in advance, because as we all know, creating content is an expensive business, right? There's a lot of money at stake. There are lots of people, there are lots of careers, reputation at stake. So I think the sooner you detect a problem, the easier it is for you to find a fix. And it starts much earlier in the day.
Fantastic. Let me flip this over now to ask you something. That was a question asked to my wife, actually, by a very well-respected gentleman in advertising, right? This gentleman was launching a book, and he'd called us in to advise him on social strategy. And part of our strategy to him was, we should do memes, because there's so much great information in your book. You should turn it into something called memes. And this gentleman didn't know what memes were at that point in time, which is not, I'm not judging him for it. That's perfectly fine. I don't know many things either. But when we made when my wife explained to him what memes were, he was livid. And he was livid to the point where he said, that's copyright violation. Right? How can you do that? How can you use an image without paying for it or taking or giving it credit? How can you do this? That's copyright violation. So let me ask my long-winded way of asking you this. A simple question is: do memes violate copyright law?
It's okay. I'm going to give you a lawyer-like answer.
Sure.
It depends on what the meme is, right?
Sure.
Yes, okay, a more technical and legalese way of looking at it would be this, that the law, as far as humor is concerned, has evolved differently in different parts of the world, right?
Right.
Um, some places you'd have what you call as a fair use sort of a license. India also has some broad strokes of fair use and principles of fair use, right? So review, critique is what we say falls under acts that are not construed as infringement, right? So now you take the context of a meme and perhaps have to see that, yes, it is satire, it is critique, it is humor. So to that extent, you'd be able to argue that it is fair use, because I cannot make a meme. I can't poke fun at someone till I didn't use that. So that's how they would be largely exempt from being construed as an act that is infringing somebody else's copyright, because the nature of the activity demands that you use it, right? It's like, by that logic, stand-up comedy. I wouldn't be able to do stand-up comedy or mimic someone or make a joke about someone if I wasn't allowed to use the base material that I am commenting on or making a joke on. So to that, by that logic, yes, it should not be construed as infringement. But having said that, the resulting meme in itself or the resulting joke in itself may have copyright. So just because it's a meme or it's a joke does not mean that that doesn't have
Right.
copyright. So again, these are all subjective. It depends on, on a case-to-case basis, what is it that's been created, to what degree is that expression original, how much value add have you done. But we, believe it or not, we actually very recently had a very interesting matter where we were arguing copyright between two jokes, where
Wow.
we were
Okay.
representing a client who had written the original joke and somebody else who had improvised on that joke. And I think that was again very interesting. But nevertheless, like I said, a joke ultimately is still scripted. It is a piece of literary work that is created, and if that joke in itself is an original joke, it is an original piece of content and therefore does have copyright in it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me complicate this a little bit, though. Okay. Now, there are companies who publish memes on the daily, right? Those memes serve as either an advertisement for their services, which could range from agency, quote unquote, creative agency, make things for your brand type things, or media publishers, right? We now own an audience, 5 million fans on Facebook, and we will publish memes for you, right? Now, by way of producing these memes, which individually may be fair use, but when looked at
In a broader
in a broad,
commercial
yeah,
sense,
sense,
are
yeah,
really trading on someone else's attributes.
attributes and IP, right?
You're right, and to that extent, it will be there. There could be a statable case of infringement or even passing off at times. And I'll give you a bunch of recent examples without taking names where, like you said, right, where ad campaigns are run, and in a particular instance, it was a play on this client's personality, and or in another instance, they had used different titles of songs, right, and used it to run an ad campaign for something completely unrelated.
Right.
So in all those instances, yes, we would be justified in saying that, look, you are trading on someone else's goodwill and reputation to further your cause, right, or to make to derive a direct or indirect commercial benefit out of it. And yes, to that extent, it would be infringement. 100, definitely. But so that's what I'm
Understood.
saying, Vineet. I think to comment on a subject like humor, memes, etc., is so subjective because it is not just the content, but it is also the context in which it is being used. How is it being communicated? What is the activity around it, right? So you'd have to wait on a case to case basis. There's really no sort of one size fits all kind of an answer for that.
I mean, I completely hear you on that. I think I'm also asking you to sort of speak for the community at large, but
Yeah, no, in fact, for that matter, even hashtags, believe it or not, but hashtags also, some of them have been trademarked,
yeah,
which means that you cannot use it without without authorization.
which is insane, right? Which is insane because it's an expression that is supposed to be democratic and open. But they're just words, right? How can you say I can't
But
use a
then it'll
word?
depend on how unique that hashtag was,
Sure, no,
right? The fact that
absolutely.
it qualified for a trademark means that some registry somewhere is recognizing that it is a specific unique combination of words and therefore deserves to or has gained such sort of usage that it's become synonymous with the person who's using it, and therefore they have granted a registration to that mark. It
Absolutely.
goes through a lot of stages before it qualifies for a registration. So
Right.
it's very interesting actually how in the age of social media and internet, IP and IP issues kind of crop up, and every single day you have a new challenge or a new sort of out of the box situation where you're scratching your head and think that how does one deal with this? So I think it's also on which side of the coin you're facing.
No, of course, because like we were talking about earlier, right? New media platforms that may or may not completely be understood by the current regulatory framework always keep emerging, right? Like I mentioned, is a WhatsApp channel or someone's WhatsApp broadcast also IP now? I could brand it and start putting it out, right? I could add you to a broadcast list and keep sending you something. Is that considered IP now, or will that be considered
So
IP?
it's actually very simple, right? WhatsApp your is just the mode that you're using to communicate,
Sure.
right? But it's the content that really it could be the subject matter of copyright. So now let's say
Right.
you've written a story that you're broadcasting to everybody on your particular broadcast list on WhatsApp. But if that story is your original story, then yes, it has copyright in it. What is it? At the end of the day,
Sure.
if I had to classify it as a piece of work, it falls under literary works. If that story is an original expression that you have come up with, then of course it's protected by copyright. The fact that I choose to communicate it on WhatsApp is irrelevant to establishing copyright in it. WhatsApp is just a mode of communication.
No, my question is slightly different. It's not about an original work that I'm putting out. Maybe I'm copying somebody else's work and putting it out on my channel without and again
Then
monetizing
that's
it in.
infringement.
Then that's infringement, right?
Then that's infringement, of
Which is
course.
what I'm coming at. Like,
Of course.
it's very interesting for. I mean, to me as someone who works in digital, and I see. I mean, brands do this all the time, right? And when you really drill it down, the creation of a meme is an infringement for Shutterstock, right? For whoever's original photograph that was, but it's also an ad campaign for them, right? It's also sending people to it that meme is becoming part of. This is very sort of convoluted relationship with media and its legality with copyright law. Let me hop on over to talk about something that we touched upon very briefly in the previous episode, which was crisis management. Right? You talked about
Right.
how how you're calm under crisis, and how it's very very important to be able to keep your head while your client might be hyperventilating. Right? Currently, it seems like this industry is only in crisis. Right? There is like one after the other,
Uh,
and I'm sure some of your clients or people related or friends have also been caught up in some of this. First of all, coming to how one news channel has taken up the mantle of going to town with I don't know what to call it anymore also, but just going to town on Bollywood. How do you see the legality of something like this, right? What is being insinuated? Somebody is being put. People are being summoned at the behest of, I mean, ostensibly at the behest of the government. What's your take on the legality of this whole situation?
I think there's a lot to be desired as far as evolution of this aspect of the law is concerned, right? About where do we draw the line when it comes to media, when it comes to press. Just the last few months, I think, have been such a heartbreaking experience actually for some of us. And I say this because I have been closely watching the crisis to some degree, have been very closely involved in crisis for certain clients. And it truly sort of makes you sit back and think that is it okay for this to be this invasive, right? And you're absolutely right when you say about media trials, because, how it's as if we're first deciding to hold someone guilty until they're proven innocent later. And I think that's such an unfair approach, especially in a country where, there is such little regulation or restrictions in terms of how you control the press. There are very little consequences. In our previous episode, we spoke about
Right.
damages, right? There is really no penalty. I mean, look at it today. Even with all the various, I could file defamation and I could take action against, channels or outlets that were, or even individuals that said certain things that they ought not to have said or that were totally baseless. What am I going to get? I'd get an apology. I'd probably get a
Right.
retraction. I'd get them to take it down. But hasn't damage already been done? And who is that enough? Is that enough of a deterrent to stop somebody from doing it again? I mean, today, if somebody is a repeat offender or is thick-skinned about it, I don't have any qualms about issuing the damn apology, right? I mean, yeah, okay, fine, you're right. But damage has been done. And, we fail to realize that you've not just done damage by that, calling out that person and putting them through a few days or weeks of harassment on social media. There are serious other commercial ramifications to it. I mean, if I'm a public figure,
Absolutely.
I have other commitments, I have reps and warranties, I have, deliverables, I have indemnities. I could have future projects. You are affecting my source of livelihood. Why is it okay then that there should be absolutely zero monetary consequence to someone that does it and gets away with it? Right.
Absolutely.
So yeah, forgive me for feeling
Oh,
so
no, no,
strongly
absolutely.
about this, but besides just broadcasters, news channels, or journalists, it's even private individuals, right? Anyone and everyone with a smartphone today thinks that they have acquired this right or power to start recording a conversation, start capturing a video, or forward screenshots with messages that could be construed completely out of context. So I think still
Absolutely.
there is no solid law that evolves on this entire subject. I don't think that the trend is, I think it's a very dangerous trend. So sooner rather than later, I hope that we have some sort of solid ruling on this and some,
Yep.
deterrent that makes people to stop and think. And, by no means, I think in certain contexts, like, for example, certain movements that were started in the past, I fully understand the place where it came from, where it became necessary to use social media as a tool to call someone out, right? But I think equally, you can't stretch that to, seek. I think if it is an allegation that is baseless, that is not backed by proof, or even after you've done it, when you have the opportunity, if you're not willing to pursue a legal recourse or a formal legal remedy, then I don't think you're absolutely justified in simply naming and shaming someone and letting that be.
That's very difficult to understand for a lot of people in a lot of places, especially when it comes to sexual harassment. But I'll come to sexual harassment in a second. I want to pose this question, this sort of matter to you, and get your thoughts, because we were discussing something diametrically opposite a minute ago, right? But I'm sure you're familiar with the Peter Thiel, Gawker, Hulk Hogan case that happened a few years ago, right? For the benefit of the listeners, Gawker used to be a sort of salacious, gossipy website that outed Peter Thiel as a gay man without his consent, obviously. Many years after that happened, Peter Thiel funded Hulk Hogan in a case where Gawker outed Hulk Hogan as having cheated on his brother's wife or something to that effect, right? And Hulk Hogan sued Gawker with the help of Peter Thiel bankrolling Hulk Hogan's case, and The court announced for Hulk Hogan, and Gawker had to pay damages to the tune of 120 million, which ended up in Gawker having to shut up shop entirely. Right now, in such a scenario, and when having some kind of monetary damage being allocated, it does give a lot of power to people who may not have the best interests at heart. I mean, do you have a point of view on the flip side? I mean, while I'm all for it, right, there should be consequences for people screaming "Mujhe drugs do" on TV. Like, someone needs to step in and say, "Hey, man, stop." And the other things, right? I mean, a lot of people are and it's happened to people, right? It's happened to Varun. It's happened to a bunch of other people. But does opening up damages? Do you think it leaves the little guy open to too much?
No, I don't think so, right? Because I mean, one is that it's not that damages is going to become the norm, right? It's not
Right.
like like a default penalty. It's not that.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of parameters that Indian courts have set over the years to determine damages, right? You have to make out a statable case for damages. You're not just getting damages for the asking. I think the
Right.
point that I was trying to make was slightly different, is that the general, or at least till date in my experience, the reluctance to at all award damages, and damages need not be to the tune of what we see in some of these lawsuits outside of India, but they could even simply be token damages. I mean, to give you an example, routinely in intellectual property disputes, right, where you have pirates, you have people that sell counterfeit products, routinely at an injunction stage also courts may award damages. And I'm not courts in fact sometimes say that, look, I'm going to make why don't you are going to pay a sum of rupees XYZ and you will give it to this charity. That's fine.
Right.
They're not damages that
Right.
have come to me as the plaintiff. I got the injunction that I wanted, and at the same time the other person has been penalized in some form, so that that person thinks twice before doing it.
Right.
Point that I'm trying to make is that yes, of course, there are checks and balances, and our
Right.
courts are going to exercise discretion matter after matter to determine whether or not there is a case for damages, and if yes, then what is the quantum of that damages. But in at least recent times, in all of these matters of this nature, we haven't seen a single instance of even token damages, right? And I think at the end of the day, if there is some way for it to be a deterrent or a penalty, then I think that's something that we ought to consider.
For sure. I think that's a very nuanced and expert way of looking at it. I think let me flip this over to sort of the last bit that I want to talk to you about. Sexual harassment and the charges around sexual harassment, whether it's trial by media, whether it's actual cases around the world. I mean, the liberal elite, quote unquote, which includes almost all of media and entertainment, is responding to improving the conditions for women working in this, right? I read, I mean, in the same Your Story profile, I read you talk about one of the reasons that you didn't take up working in Bollywood being a strange condition to work for women. And to me, it only feels like it's sort of a full circle that you're now representing some people in these cases, right? And while we can debate the matters and on evidence or whatever, what I want to bring you in on, Priyanka, is what do you see as the long term effect of this struggle, right? It's not something that, I mean, we're not going to fix sexism tomorrow. And I'm still going to say that despite all of this awareness, there still will be women and men who are victims of sexual harassment who still may not come forward and press charges. But what do you see the long term effects of this? I mean, in your experience so far, from what you've seen, is the media and entertainment industry becoming safer for women through all of this sort of hoopla around it and the application of these laws?
Look, here's what I'll say, right? I think as an industry, it's not that you don't experience sexism in other industries or sectors. And I think I'm saying this as someone who's at the very least seeing two or three different industries: music, entertainment, and law. I have seen multiple instances where, especially given my gender, yes, you do come across it. And if to tell you the truth, I think I face it far less from the entertainment industry than I do outside of it, right? Even when it comes to entertainment, it has evolved over the years, certainly evolved a lot more from the time that I was, you know, actively modeling, writing, doing theater, etc. And there have been a variety of reasons for this. I'm not saying that this Me Too movement is one of those factors, but overall, also from a lot of, there's corporates that I've entered into. There's a lot more structure. Things have the way the business has run has changed.
More
Um,
women in top positions, slightly more women in
more
places.
women in top positions, yes, certainly not as much as you'd like to see, but
For
okay,
sure.
we're just generally there's less of us in the workforce, and I don't think,
Right.
like you said, it's not a problem we're going to be able to solve overnight. It has a lot of other considerations, but you'll have good experiences and bad experiences. Let me put it like that. Yes, the industry gets a bad rep, gets a bad name because it's out there. It's the low hanging fruit. It's easy for us to talk about because everything that happens in the business of glamour and glitz is what we like to talk about, read about. I can tell you enough and more horrible instances of harassment that happen in sectors that are far removed from glamour, right? I don't like the generalization that, oh, yahan pe yehi hota hai, or that it is the worst when it comes to the industry. No, it's not. It is equally bad in a lot of other sectors. Having said that, yes, specifically with entertainment, I think to a great degree, things have changed, things have evolved. There are movements like this, of course, play their role and have their significance in making a lot of people sit up, take notice, reflect even on their behavior. You'd have instances where, even where someone hasn't been called out, but if they have been doing something that is, even subconsciously going to be subconsciously not right and may get perceived as being incorrect, being perceived as sexist use, I've seen people slowly start to correct that behavior and saying, it was wrong of me to remark X, Y, and Z. And that to me is also progress. That is
Absolutely.
really the impact that a movement leaves behind. So yeah, I think it is a safe place, at least from the various experiences that I've had in recent times, and even in my capacity as a legal advisor to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's very nicely put. I mean, my sort of only comment on this, and I mean, I've been I've witnessed the unfolding of. Sorry, you go first. I think you wanted to say something. Yes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add that, you know, as an industry also, there are enough measures being taken. That's one, right? People are
Right.
now more aware. You're setting up, you're having posh compliance, you have your ICs being set up. Even contractually, you have so many reps and warranties and deterrents and consequences that are being built in. And these are consequences that will make anyone and everyone think twice. So I think because of that, even collectively as a sector, there is effort to make sure that we're creating an environment, a workplace that is safe, that is welcoming, and that is inclusive of all.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I mean, what I was trying to say earlier was I've seen cases explode like from close proximity, right? And again, while the matter itself is for someone else to sit and pass judgment on, the way you deal with these things as organizations, as people, also matters a lot, right? And like you mentioned, if in your experience there have been people who have taken these learnings and come back and said, hey, I was wrong about that. I think that is certainly progress, right? I think for me, from where I see it, and again, 2018, 19, you've seen company after company, new media, whether it's new media, whether it's legacy in India or abroad, replace someone or fire someone, right? For me, I think the epitome of sort of responsibility that was taken was what Tanmay did after AIP, right? He said, "Yeah, you're right. I was negligent," and he stepped down. I think a lot of people took that also as a sort of weird signaling because it was him. But I think if it wasn't Tanmay speaking, and if it was any other CEO, we'd be like, yeah, that guy did the right thing. And I think we forget to sort of look at those things also critically sometimes. But for sure, man.
Also, What I was saying is that you're right. I think you've obviously seen this from close quarters, and I think when the movement broke out, so did I, because I actually was representing some of the accused that were called out at that point of time. Um, a lot of people sort of, you tend to draw some amount of flack because they feel that, oh, how can you and how could you?
Yeah.
But, that aside, I mean, you obviously come to a fair assessment of your reasons for taking up something, and because you have reason to believe to a certain extent in a person's innocence or the stance that they're taking, right? But I think what I was trying to, I lost my chain of thought, but I think what I was trying to say is, I think each one has taken their own learnings and decided to, what is it that we can, it consistently across the board in all of those matters. One thing that you notice is that, yes, what is it that we can do differently going forward? That's one. But on the other bits that I've also noticed, and again, perhaps I might not get the popularity vote for this, right? But I think to some extent we also still have a lot of deficiencies to deal with in how we're implementing POSH, or in, I mean, I think to linked with implementation is what is the punishment, and how much punishment is good enough punishment. And I'm actually saying this, more because I hear the expectations from the victim side also right now. So firstly, when I say the deficiencies in implementing POSH is, I've seen a lot of these, yes, we all talk about the allegation, we talk about constituting these committees, and we talk about the procedure, and then HR will send a mail to everyone saying, if you ever have a grievance, send email to this ID and all of that, right? But no one, absolutely no one, talks about what actually happens in an IC proceeding. No one talks about it. No one says that, are you going to be given a copy of the complaint? Are you going to be allowed to get a lawyer with you? Do you go in alone? Do you go in, if I'm a victim, I may want to have a friend accompany me just for moral support. Are these meetings recorded? I mean, we don't talk enough about this. And equally, I think there is, because it's a process that's being conducted in that sense outside of court, and
Right.
you don't have legally trained persons on that panel. Sometimes they're also, I think, not sure of procedure to be complied with, like even basic principles, right? For example, of course I should get a copy of the complaint if I'm an accused. Why can I not get a copy of the complaint? How am I supposed to respond to
Defend, yeah.
allegations without seeing what are the entirety of the allegations made, right? But equally, if I'm assuming in most cases, both parties want to lawyer up, sometimes, what's happening at the end of it? Am I going to get reimbursed or going to get some sort of legal aid for the entire process that I went through? And again, I'm saying this for both the victim as well as the accused, right? What happens? And, this is not a courtroom where there is no, you'll have to think about, like the conversation that we had earlier about damages and penalizing someone, etc. Largely speaking, it is in the context of a workplace. So there is a
Right.
corporate environment, right? Are we provisioning to provide legal aid? Maybe we should, so that it encourages enough victims to come forward. And maybe we should, so that even an accused doesn't have to think twice before going all out to defend himself
Defend.
or
Sure.
herself, right?
Sure.
So, or at the end of it, even some other sensitive things, like, a lot of times from experience, I've realized that people end up taking, going to therapy or taking counseling during the course of them suffering through that trauma. Should it not, is it a part of your company's policy, just as I would offer garden leave, or just as I would offer, medical support? What is the kind of support being offered in instances like this? So this is what I meant in terms of the deficiency in how POSH is actually adapted in a real life workplace environment. And again, I'm speaking purely out of my experience and having extensively represented on a variety of sexual harassment matters, right? And the other bit is how much punishment is good enough or bad enough. And again, something that I hear all the time is either there is a feeling of extreme that, nothing is good enough. Firing the person, suspending the person, cutting all ties from the person. And equally so, shouldn't the punishment be commensurate with the crime or the allegation? I think I just want to leave everyone with this thought and not comment on it or force my opinion on the listeners, but it's definitely some food for thought for all of us when we're faced with similar situations.
No, I think both those things that you said hit home. Like, it's absolutely things that I've thought about. I mean, and while there are deficiencies, like to the first thing, right? While there are deficiencies in the way that corporate redressal happens for sexual harassment, you compare it to the fact that the Chief Justice of India sat judgment on his own sexual harassment case, and then you're like, "Ha, cool, okay, we'll live with those deficiencies till the rest of us catch up, right?" But fully with you, I absolutely think on the second part of what you said, and I'm saying this because I have also seen allegations being made publicly, aired, just to air grievances, right? Just to clear out, and then there's no follow-up. And friends of mine have had to change jobs or leave countries to just get away from the negativity of these things, right? Because, yeah, it was one thing on one evening sometime that got misconstrued, and now my reputation is besmirched, right? So very interesting to have these thought experiments.
A lot of the punishment is our own version of lifetime imprisonment.
Sort of, right? It is. Lifetime banishment and lifetime exile, sort of, right? And again, I mean, knowing some of these people, being friends with some of these people, not all though, but it's a strange moral quandary as well for yourself, right? I mean, I can't imagine being a lawyer and a woman at that. I mean, not to be that guy, but it's a strange, difficult time. But I'm like I said, and like you said, it has become better, and it will continue to become better, at least in the entertainment space for sure, right? Priyanka, it has been wonderful talking to you. I mean,
thank you.
It is so great to hear someone look at law within the entertainment paradigm and in general with an empathetic lens, and then just walk us through these things. My last question, which is something that I ask everyone before I let them go.
Yes, I'm aware, and I still didn't come prepared.
Oh shit! Good that you left that one blank, and now we can put you on the spot. But yes, one entertainment recommendation for my listeners could be a song, a meme, a game, a book, a law, an act.
Hey, Bhagwan.
You could be like a case, huh? This case.
Oh, no, it's what I'm watching right now. I'm
Sure.
completely hooked. It's the show called The Boys.
It's the show called Boys? The Boys, yeah?
The Boys.
Oh yeah, I loved it. I saw it last week.
Anti-superhero. Awesome. Yeah. I'm completely hooked. Almost binge watching it. So yeah, that is the recommendation.
Homelander. Smashing it. Love that show, man. Great. That's The Boys from Priyanka Khimani. Once again, Priyanka, thank you so much for making time. Past 2 episodes talking to you has been brilliant. I'm sure the listeners have taken a lot of interesting legal wisdom from you. With that, we come to the end of this doubleheader with Priyanka on all things legal, or almost interesting things legal.
Thank you, Vineet. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening. This is Vineet Kanabar saying goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I also just want to ask everybody if they could go to the website ivmpodcast.com/survey and fill out a quick survey for us. It would be much appreciated. What a week we had this week. We had so much crossover, so many great guests. I don't even know where to start. Okay, yeah, I do know where to start. Let's start with Uncle Please Sit. Uncle Please Sit, Joel and Tushar had Hamsini Hariharan. Hamsini hosts a show called States of Anarchy with their network. She is a China expert, and they discussed the India-China relationship. Really fascinating conversation. Cyrus had 2 conversations this week instead of our normal Thursday Cock and Bull. Great conversations, both of them. We'll be back with our regular Cock and Bull next week. But this week, you could definitely check out the conversation he had with Varun Grover. Really fascinating stuff. And Nikhil Taneja, who was the founder of Yuva and the creative director for the India Film Project Festival, which is going on this weekend. He was on the show as well. Cyrus was also on Advertising is Dead this weekend with Varun Dugirala. Cyrus and Varun discussed Cyrus's intent on randomness. Ranveer Brar guested on Gauri Devi Dayal show. This round's on me. Another amazing conversation over there. Priyanka Khimani, one of the best IP lawyers in this country, was on Storytellers and Storysellers for a fascinating conversation. Definitely do check that out. And finally, I wanted to congratulate Zarina Poonawalla for her 100th episode. She had Ashish Vidyarthi as a guest on that. If you have not been listening to the Empowering series, please do. It's one of the great shows out there. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Nankali podcast. Every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast app या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.